Joining us live from Beijing is MS Now White House reporter Laura Barrón-Lopez. Laura, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us today from Beijing. The president seems to be using his flattery to build his relationship with Xi, even going so far to call him a friend. This is a fairly stark departure from the contentious trade war that was going on last year. What is the reaction to that tactic in Beijing so far?
That's right. Well, right now, look, Chinese President Xi Jinping gave the President Trump a big welcome, a ceremonial welcome with a military band, which the Chinese know that President Trump likes. He loves to see the pageantry in the ceremony. They had a 21-gun salute as well. And this was something that, as you just played, President Trump reacted fondly to, calling Xi Jinping a friend. And as you noted, Jackie, it's a stark departure from last year when there was the trade war and the tariff battles, which ended in a truce of sorts last fall. And the two sides are trying to keep that truce going. It's also a departure from Trump's first administration, when he and his administration that first time around talked about China as a big geopolitical foe and someone that they needed to confront and challenge. And now they view it more as a potential economic partner. And you're seeing that with the president bringing these U.S. businesses alongside him. And in some of the readouts we just got from a White House official on the meeting, they did mention that those U.S. executives, CEOs, took part in some of the meeting, the bilateral meeting between the two leaders today. But ultimately, what overshadowed this meeting was essentially the tale of two straits. For China, the Taiwan Strait; for the U.S., the Strait of Hormuz, Jackie.
Yeah, Laura, actually, let's stay a little bit on the Taiwan of it all. Trump has been notably less strong on the U.S.-Taiwan relationship than previous presidents. I'm not even sure if he's outright supported Taiwanese independence. Are there any concerns that he sees this issue as the negotiating chip when it comes to getting China to ultimately put more leverage and more pressure onto Iran to come to the negotiating table and reopen the Strait of Hormuz? And what do those concessions sort of look like?
Well, that's the big question, which is the president going to concede anything on Taiwan and Taiwan's independence? Now, we know that China wants the U.S. to change its position from one that officially says that the U.S. does not support Taiwanese independence to outright opposing it. Now, we haven't received any indication other than the president's public statements leading into the trip saying that he knew that Xi Jinping was going to bring it up. But when the president was asked about it earlier today, when he was at a cultural event at the Temple of Heaven, he was briefly asked by the Pool multiple times whether or not he talked about Taiwan with Xi Jinping, and the president ignored those questions. And then when you see the two readouts from both sides, you highlighted that the Chinese government mentioned Taiwan multiple times in what they said the discussions that were had between the two leaders, issuing a warning essentially saying that if the U.S. doesn't change its position, if it doesn't approach this properly, then the relationship between China and the U.S. will be in, quote, great jeopardy. But there was no mention of Taiwan in the readout from the White House official that we received. Instead, it was all focused on Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. So, again, you know, look, I was talking to former national security officials leading into this, and currently I'm still talking to them, and they are concerned about what the president may concede when it comes to Taiwan to extract some help with Iran, Jackie.
Laura, stick with me for just a sec because I want to talk more about this. But MS Now is citing 3 U.S. officials with knowledge of the matter who say there is now concern amongst U.S. officials that private Chinese military companies are considering selling shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles to Iran. This is via third-party countries. The officials add that it isn't clear whether any Chinese-made missiles have been delivered to Iran or the extent to which the Chinese government has approved the sales. But U.S. intelligence agencies are monitoring possible shipments, including countries in Africa. The Chinese government has repeatedly denied arms sales to Tehran, but one U.S. official is telling MS Now's David Rohde, quote, "We're tracking a number of deals. There is definitely some activity." The officials emphasized that any sales are being conducted by private Chinese companies, but some expressed skepticism that the Chinese government would be unaware of such sales, saying, quote, China is at a minimum helping Iran stay afloat in this war and blockade. Laura, do you think that the president is expected to ask China for assistance with this issue in particular, especially considering this new reporting and how that could affect ongoing negotiations? I mean, the president in the past, when asked about the sort of invisible levers that China is pulling on right now with regards to replenishing their military capabilities, has simply said that China is being a great actor. But it seems like that might not be the case.
Yeah, I mean, what a senior U.S. official told us, even ahead of this, was that the president had talked to Xi Jinping multiple times, stressing, the desire that China would not purchase as much oil or goods or help Iran, which, keep them afloat during this conflict, during this war. So, yes, it's expected that the president is going to continue to push China on Iran and on their aid to Iran and on whether or not there could be these arms sales. But again, we have very limited information at this point in terms of how this first bilateral meeting went. We know that talks are going to continue into tomorrow between the two leaders. And I have to say that based on the sources I've talked to, the expectations are relatively low in terms of what kind of big deliverable President Trump is going to be able to get from China when it comes to help with Iran. But it's certainly something that the White House, that President Trump is speaking with to Xi Jinping about, Jackie.
MS Now White House reporter Laura Barone Lopez in Beijing. Thank you so much.